You don't have to believe the stories on my blog. You can dismiss them as good hallucinations or bad fiction if you want to, but they're all true. The darkness was never empty. There are things that wait for the innocent and unwary to turn their backs. What is it you think I'm talking about here? Ghosts? Vampires? Ghouls? If only it were that simple. The creatures of the night are still out there, but they're not shadowing your every footstep. They just check your status updates from the comfort of their tombs. All I ever wanted was to be a do-it-yourself style reporter, but more often than I like, I find myself becoming part of my stories. It turns out gods and monsters don't like their secrets getting out any more than your standard politician or celebrity. We all know how this is going to turn out in the end. I'm already long overdue for jail, the loony bin, or a guest of honor spot at a monster buffet. But until that fateful day, I'm not going to back down or give up. My name is Brian Foster, and some people call me the Night Blogger. The Night Blogger, The Graveyard Game and Other Cemetery Plots, Part 5. Dies Irae. October 31st. What follows is the story of the longest Halloween night of my life. It begins with a flickering of lights and ends with me handcuffed to a hospital bed, scribbling these notes out, in the hope that Mrs. Vincenzo will be able to get this posted for me. I've got a bad feeling I won't be getting back to my apartment anytime soon. There are too many bodies. Someone has to get blamed, and it looks like it's going to be me. But once again, I'm getting ahead of myself. The Bishop family made sure I couldn't get near Sarah. There was always someone there to verbally or physically accost me. I spent all my free time in the main lobby of the Albany Medical Center, trying to find out whatever I could about Sarah's condition. Through a combination of bribes, eavesdropping, and outright HIPAA violations, I learned was that, yes, she was awake, but she was withdrawn and uncommunicative. For now, she was under protective observation in her hospital room. There was talk of moving her upstairs to the psychiatric wing, but her parents were having none of that. Thankfully, the hospital had free Wi-Fi, so I spent my time in the lobby doing research, emailing my important contacts, and giggling at the occasional cat picture. It didn't even really register to me that it was Halloween until dusk. That's when I started to see kids from the pediatric ward being led around by a nurse wearing a pointy black witch's hat. I suppose my heart should have been warmed by the sight of those children, but I just kept watching the nurse. What she saw as a playful costume, I saw as a way for the practitioners of true witchcraft to hide in plain sight. For those of you Wiccans out there getting ready to send off angry emails, let me once again remind you that I'm talking about true witchcraft, the summoning and control of outer and inner forces, the signing of your name in the Black Book of Astaroth. I'm not talking about any of that commercialized postmodern neo-pagan pseudo-Catholicism that passes for witchcraft to the general public. Okay, now you can send me your angry emails. Another hour or so passed. I kept myself busy with my iPhone. What had previous generations done without these little gadgets? Read books or struck up conversations with strangers, probably. The poor bastards. First, I played around with my ringtones, trying to pick a new song to let me know when I'd gotten a text message. Once I had exhausted the possibilities there, I started browsing the paranormal message board at 4chan. I came across some guy insisting that space aliens had forced him to breed with a skunk ape. I did my best to convince him that there was no such thing as space aliens, so he just must have a thing for skunk apes. The ensuing flame war kept me busy until around 11 o'clock. That was when all the lights went out. At first, everyone in the hospital lobby was quiet. Then there was a little nervous laughter. It wasn't completely dark. The streetlights shone in through the windows. I got to my feet and started walking. Then the questions started. The who, what, why, and where.
Who knows what happened? What should we do?
Where were the emergency lights like they have in the movies? Whispered conversations moved through the room. I could hear the growing panic in every voice. The hair on the back of my neck bristled. In my younger days, I might have tried to warn these people something was about to happen. I would have told them that all hell was about to break loose, but I knew better now. Anything I said would be ignored or mocked. Then, after all hell was finished breaking loose, I would be blamed. No one saw me slip into the stairwell. I started up the steps using my iPhone for a flashlight. A muffled crash worked its way down through the blackness. Sarah was on the 5th floor. I started to rush up the stairs. I was on the 3rd floor landing when a shape surged towards me. It was a wide and formless snarl of limbs and legs. It screamed and shouted with a dozen voices. It flowed towards me, pushing me backwards. Both my feet were stepped on, my phone was knocked from my hand, an elbow caught me in the stomach. I shouted, but none of the panicked people in the crowd paid any attention. I was just an obstacle standing between them and safety. All I could do was grab onto the handrail and hold on until they passed. When it was over, I found myself sitting on the 2nd floor stairway trying to catch my breath. I fumbled around in the darkness until I found my stomped, mangled straw fedora. I knew I must already be too late, but I still hoped there was something I could do. Sarah needs me, I thought. I spied the telltale glow of my iPhone on the 3rd floor landing. It wasn't until I reached out to retrieve it that I saw the figure lurking in the shadows nearby. Mr. Jack had seen better days. The burning bus had left the bottom half of his face looking like an explosion at a chili cook-off. His clothes had been reduced to nothing more than rags and mud. The fire axe he was carrying, however, that looked shiny new. He said. Then he brought the axe crashing down on the face of my upturned iPhone. He missed my grabbing fingers by inches. In the sudden darkness, all I could do was pick a direction and run. In case you didn't know, that is the sound an axe makes when it's being swung at your head. It was pitch black on the stairwell, so that sound was the only way I could judge how close the axe was coming to me. The answer was too fucking close. I had bolted down the stairs while my iPhone was being chopped to bits. The next thing I knew, I was being chased. Thanks to his wounds, all Mr. Jack could say was, but the way he said it had me really worried. The more steps I cleared, the further I was getting from Sarah's room. Hell, I wasn't even sure what floor I was on anymore. All I knew was that I had to keep my head down and keep running. Mr. Jack said. Funny the things that go through the back of your mind at a time like this. Sure, I was mostly concerned with staying alive, but a part of me couldn't stop wondering where Mr. Jack had gotten an axe from. Was it a fire axe? Did hospitals even have fire axes anymore, in this age of metal detectors and flat-out paranoia? It was one of those things you never really paid attention to. But if Mr. Jack hadn't grabbed his weapon out of a convenient wall-mounted case, that meant that a clown with a burnt-up face had stopped by the local hardware store on the way here. These are the mysteries that consume my life. I misjudged where step met landing and went down hard on my bad knee. The knee that had robbed me of my football scholarship almost a decade ago. The head of the axe came down hard on the floor beside me. Another 3 inches and I would have looked like Vincent van Gogh. Another 3 inches more and I would have been a modern art masterpiece. I grabbed my tormentor and threw us both down the next set of stairs. As plans go, I'd used worse. We tumbled ass over tea kettle. My elbow hit Mr. Jack in the throat, and I heard a very satisfying crunching sound. But the blunt end of the axe hit me right in the groin, so I didn't feel much like celebrating. We both slammed into the hard floor of the next landing. My legs wanted to curl up, but I made myself stand. Maybe it was my eyes getting used to the darkness, or maybe it was the stars circling my head, lighting the way. But I could clearly see Mr. Jack lying flat on his back. On his way down the stairs, he had landed on the business end of the axe. His chest crumpled dryly around the blade. He wasn't breathing, but then again, I couldn't really remember if he'd ever breathed under normal circumstances. Now, this is the part where I did something really stupid. Well, stupider than usual anyway. I grabbed the axe and yanked it free. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I figured I might need a weapon. Maybe I wanted to see why he wasn't bleeding. Maybe I figured you guys would want to know what I'd find. There was a piercing screech, and something burst up out of the wound. It was all motion and round yellow eyes. Wings beat at my face, talons dug into the flesh of my cheek. I dropped the axe and heard it clatter down the stairs. I flailed at the shape, trying to smash it. I was still hitting myself in the head when it fluttered up and away. I fell down hard on my ass and waited for everything to stop hurting. It had been a bird, a very specific kind of bird, in fact. I thought of what Ashley Fowler had said to me. Poor Brian, just a rat trying to run with the owls. It begins and it ends like it always does, with me running in the dark. This time, however, I'm not running away from something. I'm running to someone. I've cracked a rib, but the only reason I haven't noticed is that my trick knee is screaming louder and louder with every step. And there's this damn owl buzzing me, slamming into my back for a few scratches and then fluttering away before I could get my hands around its neck. After what seemed like forever and a 3-day weekend, I reached the 5th floor door and stepped out into something wet. There was water everywhere. The drinking fountain had been torn off the wall, and the exposed piping was bleeding out onto the floor. In some places the water puddled. In others it ran down the hallway in little rivers. There were papers and binders with broken spines everywhere. A food trolley and a crash cart lay on top of one another near the nurse's station. Then, of course, there were the bodies. 5 of them in total, all in scrubs and sensible shoes. Some were slumped over their chairs, others were flat on their backs. There was no sign of how they had died, but the expressions on their faces left me pretty damn sure that whatever it was hadn't been pleasant. I don't know what I longed for more, my iPhone or the axe I had left behind. There was a screech and the owl flew up and over my head, its talons ripping into my scalp. When I reached up to touch the wound, I felt my fingers slip under a ribbon of loose skin. The owl kept flying down the hallway, then banked into Sarah's room. I half ran, half limped after it. Sarah's bed was empty. I would have turned right back around to go looking for her if I hadn't noticed the window. The frosted glass had been shattered but not broken. Web-like striations fanned out from a single point of impact. It framed the moon perfectly, but the cracks divided and subdivided it, fracturing it into tiny slivers. A 1,000-faced moon. The owl screeched again. I dove for cover. There was a crash as it sailed straight into and then through the window. Broken glass rained down onto the parking lot. The owl's wings beat the air as it flew higher and higher. I dabbed at the blood slowly running into my eyes and waited, expecting it to turn back and have another go at me. The damn bird never came back. It just kept flying until it was nothing more than a dark speck against the light of the now single-faced moon.
You have to leave,
Sarah said. She was in the doorway, not looking at me, just staring at the floor like a guilty child. If I had been any kind of hero, I would have taken her in my arms and made everything all right. But I'm no hero, so instead I asked,
what happened here?
She turned away and started walking down the hall. Her bare feet splashed in the water.
I did. You did this?
I chased after her.
How?
It was easy.
How?
I asked again. I grabbed her elbow and spun her around.
What happened here?
The sight of her made me stagger backwards. It was her eyes. The pupils had become impossibly wide. The retinas had turned the same shade of yellow as the moon's light. When Sarah spoke, her every word was punctuated with a sob.
Gorgo. Mormo. Luna.
Then she was running, heading for the overturned supply cart while I just stood there. My mouth had gone numb. My brain, too. The pieces were falling into place with a cold inevitability. Sarah was on her knees going through the supply cart, throwing things every which way until she found what she was looking for. The sound she made then might have been one of agony or of relief. When I saw what she had hold of, I found my voice.
No!
I ran for her, tackled her and knocked her to the floor. But she was strong. She kept hold of the defibrillator paddles.
It's not your fault.
Sarah kicked away from me. Was it water on her face, or were those strange yellow eyes able to cry? With a head wound, a now fully broken rib, and a torn knee, all I could do was crawl.
Don't. I was always meant for this. I never had a choice. Just wait. Can't. Almost too late.
A second voice began to intrude on her own. It was sharp and rasping. She pressed the paddles against her chest, then thought better of it and held one of them to her head. The main part of the device clattered as it was dragged along the wet floor.
This is going to hurt.
What would a hero have done right then at that moment of truth? Something noble and self-sacrificing, no doubt, but I didn't think I would be able to stop her in time. Worse yet, I was sure that stopping her was just what the thousand-faced moon wanted me to do. Worst of all, when you come right down to it, I wanted to live just a little longer. Three voices shouted as one.
Mor stupidet natura, cum resurget creatura, judicanti responsura.
Then there was a crackle and a sizzling flash. Everything went white. A few days later, I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed. How was it Detective Bradshaw described me? Oh yeah, flash fried but still alive. Sarah was dead. Just another in a list of 11 corpses everyone seems to think I'm somehow responsible for. I've told my story to the police, the federal authorities, and my landlady. But even Mrs. Vincenzo won't believe all of it. They're going to charge me with something, but I don't think anyone is sure what it will be yet. So I'll just hold out hope that it will be something I can escape with probation or community service. When I think about Sarah, really think about her, I feel a very familiar ache. That's the thing about tragedies. They work backwards, making even the good memories painful. Sure, I might want to remember my mom, but doing so might lead me to thinking about how she was at the end. It's the kind of pain that makes you throw away photo albums and ignore the holidays. I think I better wrap up. My court-appointed psychiatrist is here. She's an old friend, and we have a lot of catching up to do. Fact: no one has yet to find any reason for the sudden loss of power at the Albany Medical Center. Fact: the grounds of the Pinewood Cemetery have been claimed by the state of New York. There is no word yet on what they plan to do with it, but they have surrounded it with some very tall and impressive fences. Fact: mors stupebit et natura cum resurgit creatura, judicanti responsura is from the Dies Irae. Please, dear readers, don't go telling me that Sarah or I saved the world. Not when we almost doomed it with something we thought was a game. A game? More like a dare or an urban legend. Don't feel safe because of what happened. If we could call up a nightmare, why can't someone else? Think about it. 1 million children chant Bloody Mary every night. Who's to say she might not show up in one of those million mirrors? Is it really so impossible that a poorly timed misstep could leave someone's mother a paraplegic? Somewhere out there, some fool is getting ready to play the graveyard game. They might not follow the rules exactly, or even really know what they're doing at all. But in the end, will that matter? The whole damn world is a graveyard after all.
The Night Blogger was written and produced by Al Bruno III. Production assistance was by Brian Mancy. The voice of the Night Blogger is Brian Mancy. Music was by Josh Bruno. For more internet tomfoolery, please stop by my blog, albruno3.blogspot.com. And while you're there, please consider clicking the donate button. Your support really helps.